Hey, everybody. Boy, do I have a treat for us today. The man, the legend, David Linthicum. How are you?
Legend in my own mind. Evan, how's it going, man?
You and me both. Great to speak with you. We've chatted many times in the past, particularly in your decade-long tenure at Deloitte, but you are a free-range, free bird now, and I have so many questions and topics to discuss with you today. Before that, how do you describe yourself now in your work, now that you're out of the corporate rat race?
Yeah, I guess I'm best described as a tech influencer focusing on cloud and AI. I obviously spent 8-9 years at Deloitte as the chief cloud strategy officer, worked on cloud strategy, worked with a lot of clients, had a lot of fun there. But now I'm, looking at technology, trying to figure out where it's going to be applicable to businesses. How do they use it? Patterns of success, patterns of failure, and the ability to kind of look at this stuff through a pragmatic eye, which I think is missing out there. So telling the truth, calling balls and strikes, trying to not get down with the narrative as much as possible, and helping people get through AI, helping people get through cloud computing, and trying to figure out what this technology is going to fit and how to use it.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack, but we have some time, and I appreciate you joining here today. Gosh, where do we even start? Let's start cloud. You mentioned cloud. I've been following the cloud journey like yourself for 2 decades. Are we in the golden era of cloud now, or was in the cloud hangover era? How would you describe the state of the union here?
I think it's definitely the cloud hangover. And what we've done is kind of baked it into the cake. So in other words, it's part of the infrastructure. We're not looking at it as new technology anymore. It's in its 6th or 7th generation. Now that AI is coming up fast and furious, people are looking at the cloud as a place to run it, but also reevaluating many of the migrations that they made over the last 15 years to the cloud, many of which I was involved in. And so in other words, they've migrated 10,000 applications to the cloud. They got 50% of their infrastructure, which is outsourced to AWS, Microsoft, or Google, or perhaps even somebody else. And now they're trying to figure out, how they're going to make money at it. As I wrote my Insiders book, people are realizing the price of cloud is about 3 to 4 times what they thought it was going to be. And I'm seeing that as a common pattern. And so they are looking at the value of this technology and then trying to figure out if they need to modernize it or normalize it in some way that's going to bring more value back to the business. Because as my CIO friends tell me, and those are the people actually the heroes of the world trying to make this AI cloud stuff work, that they don't have an unlimited pile of money. And the reality is if the cloud is taking more than their share, then they're unable to put it in other places. It's naming AI, edge computing, whatever they want to invest in. And they're trying to normalize that and trying to find value in these stacks. And so many of these enterprises are reevaluating the cloud. They're moving it off to co-location providers, managed service providers, or even modernizing their systems in place in the cloud. So the cloud is, trying to find its legitimate place where it's going to do the least amount of damage and provide the most amount of value. And I think that is the big focus now. And so it is definitely in the hangover stage. I think most of the CIOs that I talk to, they feel like they're getting extorted by the cloud providers, not necessarily getting value from them. And they're locked into those infrastructures and they're trying to make sense of it. And that's really the name of the game right now. And now the AI is just putting urgency behind it.
Wow, that was really well said in just under a minute. So the cloud bill hangover era, I think, is the way we describe it. Of course, it wouldn't be a tech chat if we didn't talk about AI. Isn't one of the challenges is AI is suddenly making this old enterprise software look even more ancient? I mean, isn't that one of the main challenges? We're forcing enterprise SaaS into modernization, whether they like it much or not.
It is. And I think that's, it's kind of a core challenge of the SaaS providers out there now. They have a couple of things. Number one, AI is showing them up in terms of their ability to provide value. And certainly like things like Salesforce automation, I'm able to leverage chat GPTs in ways, LLMs in ways that I'm able to get value out of it more so than the SaaS systems out there, Salesforce and, the hundreds of others that are out there. And the other thing is they're going to end up losing revenue from the fact that people are multiplexing their SaaS connections. In other words, they're not necessarily using SaaS as a human, but they're using it or consuming it as an agent. And so in other words, you can have one agent which is consuming few less sessions of SaaS, and therefore their revenue is going to go down. So they're trying to figure that out. So everybody called for their demise, a couple of months ago, and I got a few reporters who talked to me about that. I think that's overblown. I think at the end of the day, they're going to have to get used to the new market. The reality is that they're selling software and they're selling business solutions. And if people are able to consume those business solutions in other places, certainly an LLM or basically some of the new startups that are leveraging LLMs, that's going to be the new normal, and they're going to have to figure out how to make it work. And I think there's going to maybe a less share of a pie out there ultimately, and then certainly the growth is going to slow down a bit. So they're going to have to figure out a new path through that.
Well said. On a side note, you and I both have a affinity for nostalgia, tech nostalgia, retro tech, retro computing.
I love your posts, by the way. Your posts are amazing.
Thank you. And I think it's because we're both old, or at least of that era. We begin to look back. Do you remember when software was sold in shrink rack boxes? You went into a store and you bought your software and you owned it. And is this truly nostalgia, or are we going to get back to that in some form or fashion one day, do you think? Maybe with AI and private AI and that kind of thing.
I think those days are gone. I think going into a micro center, which was my favorite, my happy place back before the net, we had to go to the, tech, to the tech newsstand and, buy all the different papers and things like that. And then also getting software and getting the CD, or even getting the 3x5-inch floppies, or even the 5.5-inch floppies.
Or 20 of them, but yes.
20 of them, yeah, that was awesome, amazing. Installing an operating system took all day. Those days are long gone. Everything's going to be connected. Everything's going to be automatically distributed, things like that. That's just the way it's going to be. But I think at the end of the day, businesses are going to be able to choose their own journey in terms of what kind of software is going to be needed specifically for them. Now, if you talk to people who are consuming SAP and Salesforce and other, canned business applications, are going to say, well, it really kind of meets about 90% of my needs. And the other 10%, it doesn't. And I think where we're headed now, you're going to be able to define what that 10% additional is, and you will build that on top of the SaaS systems, or even build a complete SaaS system for yourselves. And I think that's going to be the benefits of AI. Now, it's a little dangerous to start generating code. It's basically going to be something that's going to work awesome until you try to maintain it, and that's going to fall apart. But we're going to find some some kind of a gray space between what SaaS providers are able to provide and the ability to augment those sorts of things with AI. And I think the SaaS providers are trying to figure that out now. They're doing a lot of missteps in the marketplace. I wish I was there as their CTO. I could guide them as to where they should be focused. But eventually they'll figure it out. And I think SaaS is going to be a very different game in 3 or 4 years, probably even just 2 years. Based on what it is today. And it's going to be a very different market. People are going to choose their own journey. They're not necessarily going to choose the Salesforce journey or the NetSuite journey or the SAP journey. It's going to be a little bit more customized for their exact needs.
Yeah. And speaking of needs and journeys, everyone's talking about AI-driven transformation, but so much of it is being blocked for many reasons, cultural, financial, bad data architectures. What's happening in actuality about these AI journeys, these transformations, that's stopping them from really reaching the potential that's so talked about?
Yeah, 2 words: money and talent. I mean, that's what I'm hearing all the time. And so some of the tech providers or AI providers are coming to me and they say, we're not seeing the adoption that we thought they would see. AI is going to be the next revolution. You hear any keynote, talking about the AI first enterprise and all this kind of dribble out there with that. But the reality is that, sure, but you got to remember they don't have an unlimited piles of money, and you're really kind of talking about them about building solutions that are going to cost 10 to 20 times that of using traditional software. People don't realize that. And, those are the metrics. You can go ahead and, Google it or ChatGPT it, and you're going to find those metrics are going to be sound. So without that big pile of money that the enterprises don't have, it's difficult for them to move into AI. That's the big thing. And I think that unless they are able to free up some resources, or the AI industry, if you're listening, AI industry, get a clue here, are able to provide more pragmatic use of the technology, is going to be optimized for how much money they're looking to pay, versus assuming that we're going to throw GPUs at everything and DRAM at everything and all this expensive resources. Get into the little bit more of a pragmatic deployment. Also, the ability to kind of look at the use cases. AI is not meant for everything. It's probably meant for about 20 to 40% of the applications at the bare minimum, at the best case scenario. So try to figure out how to pick your battles. And I think people are mispicking their battles right now. So spending too much money, mispicking their battles. And the other thing would be talent. In other words, we just don't have enough AI people around who understand AI. And we have a lot of people out there, they're doing real damage. When I hear, I'm an AI strategy officer, and I kind of look at what they're doing, and I realize they're just kind of guessing their way through it and following the hype. And that's not the way to do it. They're going to be spending lots of money fairly quickly, very much like we did with cloud 15 years ago, where not a lot of business value that's coming back. And so the reality of that, we're not producing enough AI people who have an understanding of AI, specifically how it's going to be strategically used. People were able to look at it with a more pragmatic eye. They're just throwing money at it, and that's going to just get them in trouble. So I see very many of the same patterns, how we messed up cloud computing, 10, 15 years ago, occurring in the AI field right now. And so eventually there's going to be a day of reckoning. We talk about the cloud hangover. There's going to be a huge AI hangover. It's going to feel worse than any other hangover we ever had.
Well, get your hangover remedies ready. Speaking of AI, agentic AI, of course, is all the rage. And I personally, professionally think for very good reason. I have two agents I'm keeping an eye on in the background here as we're talking. One from Manus that's doing some posting for me. The other from Claude Cowork that's editing a video in a way that I could never do personally. So as a solo practitioner, small business, I guess you could call me, I'm super excited. I mean, this is a force multiplier. Their Cowork is a true digital worker, at least for me. But what's happening in the enterprise? Why, isn't agentic AI really being deployed in the vision of digital workers in which it's being touted? Is it just the complexity and the rules and the security challenges? Is it really not ready for prime time yet?
It is for edge cases. Now, everything you just described to me is an edge case. In other words, you're using it to enhance your productivity. In other words, instead of working on a terminal or working on your workstation, you have an agent that's basically taking that stuff over and is able to carry out aspects of it and ability to automate tasks. Agentic AI, and we've known this, since the 80s, and that's when I was building AI agents back then. We're going to be really good at that. The ability to take proactive tasks, the ability to learn as it goes, the ability to, in essence, emulate kind of human intelligence and carry out certain very narrowly focused tasks, just like you just described. And I think we're going to see some uplift there. But the reality is the real value that the businesses are going to find from agentic AI or AI in general is going to be with the core use cases. In other words, their ability to automate inventory control and sales, sales automation, logistics processing, factory resource management, all these kind of core things that really allow them to make money versus the edge cases where it's just basically enhancing somebody's, personal productivity, which is where people are using it now. So the big thing is, number one, finding the business cases for it. So agentic AI is going to have very narrowly focused use cases. You just hit a couple that are going to be, that I'm seeing really kind of a strong use cases for agentic AI. It's not going to have use cases for the larger enterprises for the most part. If anything, it's going to be core AI systems, generative AI, or just basically machine learning or even deep learning based systems, old school stuff. And that's where I think people don't understand the match. In other words, the tech guys are coming to me and they're saying, hey, we're not seeing the adoption of agentic AI based on, what we think we saw. And I say, well, number one, you didn't hear it from me. And so, go back to those influencers and yell at them. So number two is they don't have a lot of money to deploy at this stuff. And the big thing is it's going to have very narrow use cases, which are going to be more edge cases. And so it's not going to be core to your business. It's not going to be, replacing all of your humans with digital workers. I mean, that's stuff like McKinsey's saying and other folks are talking about. We have, 20,000 of our employees are agents. All that stuff's a pile of crap. And at the end of the day, again, you get into the monetary resources, your use of the technology, your ability to have true architects who are able to look at how you're going to apply this stuff. It's one of these things where it's helpful, but it's not the revolution that people think it's going to be. And the reality is we've been doing agentic AI since the 80s, since I got in this business. We're just really, really good at using it now. We get lots of very cool platforms, but the way in which it's architected and the way in which it's defined, the proactive use of AI is going to have very few use cases out there relative to all the business problems we're looking to solve.
AI is changing the game of business. Will you be on the winning team? I'm Jordan Wilson, the host of the Everyday AI podcast and your coach to help you learn the X's and O's of AI. Artificial intelligence isn't just a new player in the game, it's a new sport altogether. So if you don't quickly put AI into play, your competitors will run up the score. I've spent my whole life building winning teams, from coaching basketball to working with big players like Nike and Jordan Brand. My next move? Helping you win with Everyday AI. Listen wherever you get your podcasts or on everydayaipodcast.com. Let's tap into AI together and put points on the board.
Wow, such a realistic take and great insights. You advise so many Fortune 2000 CIOs out there. What's one AI investment you'd suggest they avoid, at least right for now?
I think it would be in the agentic AI space based on the amount of hype that's out there. And so that's the number one question that I get in there. I have the best-selling agentic AI architecture course out on LinkedIn Learning about, we're pushing up to about 300,000 people have taken the course and graduated from the course. So they come to me with they're hoping to get agentic AI cheerleader and trying to figure out, what you're going to use for this stuff. And they're going to get a pragmatic understanding of what an architect should tell you. In other words, I'm here to represent the business. And that is so overblown right now based on what the leaders of these companies are saying. I mean, I had a video that said, agentic everything, agentic people, agentic water, and it's all part of the nomenclature now, where it's almost silly and ridiculous. And I don't think the enterprises are going to be able to follow that and really kind of make use of it, basically for the reasons that we just talked about. So my advice would be, it's always going to be an architectural resource. You're able to leverage an architectural pattern that you're able to bring to some solutions, but shouldn't be applied everywhere. Normally, best I can tell, it's going to be 10%, 15% of the existing problem domains that are out there. And you're going to have to figure out how to use it in very narrowly focused ways. Don't get involved in the hype. Don't listen to all the craziness is going on right now. Look at your own issues, figure out how the technology is going to back in and solve any number of those problems. And chances are it's not going to be agentic. And chances are if you're going to use AI, you're going to have to use it sparingly just because of the cost. So that's the reality of it. I hate to be the designated buzzkill, but there's so many people out there that are running around in circles, with their hair on fire, saying agentic AI, agentic AI, agentic AI. And it's going to be replaced by some other buzzword in a couple of years, and we're going to be on to something else. And it's going to be just craziness. And hopefully not a lot of people are going to buy into, into the voodoo, that's supposed to be agentic AI, and we're going to learn from it and then move on. And I think we're going to see, this technology, don't get me wrong, technology is value. I mean, the use cases you just presented are an example of that. I also have OpenClaw running on a Mac Mini, and I'm doing experimentations for my agentic AI class and all that kind of stuff we're doing. But the reality is I also see its viability and its use, and I think it's going to be overly exposed right now. So that's my only bummer, prediction is the agentic AI stuff is probably a fraction of what the value that they're proposing.
Well, it's great to see some balance. The sunshine pump is constantly pumping every day, including yours truly. I to get excited about emerging tech, but balance in all things. But speaking of balance, I mean, what does, in your view, a modern enterprise architecture stack look like in 3 years? What is your vision of, this architecture and apps and cloud and orchestration and how that comes together in a realistic but, elegant way?
Yeah, pretty much like it looks now. Yeah, Evan, I would love to tell you that it's going to be completely replaced by an agentic everything, and there's going to be no humans and all that kind of stuff. And the reality is that enterprises don't move that fast. So the revolution, and basically look at the past patterns. The revolution of cloud, back in 2009 through 2013. I mean, Gartner was saying we're going to be, have 80% of our applications in the cloud in a year, and everybody gets excited about that. But if you go forward a year, basically their stacks looked exactly the same, maybe with a few cloud projects there. So the stack is going to be hopefully going to be something with better data, because everybody has to get a hand on their data to get any kind of AI stuff working or any kind of business processes working. And hopefully they can do aspects of that in 3 years. But I don't think a lot of progress is going to be made just because the amount of money that can be spent and how quickly they can use. Now, if it was 10 years, 15 years, maybe a little different. There's going to be some AI that's going to be associated with a stack, but it's going to be, maybe 20% of the existing systems. And typically the edge cases, they're going to be best automated by that. It's not going to be many of the core systems that we talked about, Salesforce automation and factory management and all the things that are really core to the business, just because the amount of cost it's going to take to augment those systems and the risk it's going to take them offline to get them changed. So you go forward 3 years, you're looking at, the stack of a hospital system or a factory or a manufacturer or a retailer. It's going to look very much like it is today, with probably a few pockets of AI, that they're able to leverage, probably a lot of AI that's been snuck into the enterprise by being bound to whatever application software they're using. Obviously, everything in the world right now, if you're using any software, any automation, they're going to have AI, which is going to be an option of the system. They hook everything up to an LLM. But as far as real value, real usage of the system, it's going to be very much like you see today. And it's a bummer, but the reality is enterprises, and this is my experience, been in there a long time, only move so fast. They only have so much money. They are willing to approve, but the improvement is going to take 5 to 10 years. It's never going to take 2 to 3 years. And it's definitely never going to take a year. Anybody tells me that it's going to be a year in production, we're going to move to 50% of the human, I heard this a bunch of times, 50% of the humans are going to be replaced by agents in just a year's time. You're full of crap. You're going to be wrong. And so I hate to say it, I would love to have that happen. I love science fiction, but the reality is I have real clients that have real budgets and real objectives. And I'm very quickly to tell them pragmatically what they're able to do.
Oh, that's great advice. And if anything, the cost equation was for me even a surprise with my 2 agents, hundreds and hundreds of dollars in token costs. This is at a high plan and with subsidized token costs from Claude and Madison and others. So the bill for those tokens is only now kind of catching up for all of these use cases. Probably some of these use cases will cost more than the human or humans that were doing the job. So there's, like you said, so much hype needs to meet the reality out there. What's an enterprise tech or trend that you think is underhyped or underappreciated? Maybe something used personally. I'll give my example. I'm just so excited about the wireless technologies from Starlink, 5G Advanced, which is sort of the bridge between 5 and 6G. You're seeing from some players really exciting opportunities for video and other applications, and Wi-Fi 7 now coming, Wi-Fi 8. Really interesting opportunities for campus wireless. But what about yourself? What are some of the technologies you're tracking that you think aren't getting a lot of attention?
Actually, similar to yours, but not really communication, but dealing with the growth of the edge-based stuff. And so in other words, the ability to use devices and automobiles and all these sorts of things. And even looking, putting AI at the edge and many of these things, that's going to be a huge growth opportunity right now because we have a lot of processing power that lives in these devices. My thermostats, everything else is pretty much a high-powered computer as long as the memory doesn't get expensive. And the ability to really kind of push many of the processes out these devices closer to where it's going to be dealing with the data and where you do have additional bandwidth availability. You just mentioned technologies are going to be moving in the area is really kind of underrated. And so in other words, everybody's talking about edge technology 5 years ago. Now everybody's focused back on putting things into some sort of a centralized processor and building data centers and, shoving everything into that. And the reality is we don't need to do that. We have all these underutilized devices, edge-based computers. Our computers we're staring at right now, I guarantee you they're at 5% utilization. We're able to use them for other things. And the ability to use those in a more effective way and the ability to have common infrastructure to make that happen. So common security control planes, common operations control planes, governance control planes, all these sorts of things are going to be needed to make that happen. That's what's being undersold right now. And many enterprises who had very good edge computing strategies a few years ago have kind of abandoned that, chasing the AI stuff. And the reality is they should be thinking of both. And I think that they're going to be missing out on a big opportunity to leverage technology in a way that is truly going to be a force multiplier.
Love that. Good to know. You're in Virginia, Northern Virginia, epicenter of the data center world. How did you survive to this point in terms of water and power with all of those data centers in your backyard? Kind of a cheeky question, but what is a reality given this huge pushback against data centers, multiple states banning data center projects, grassroots folks out there protesting data center builds for, maybe good reasons? What's your take on this whole really difficult question right now?
Yeah, the data center folks really kind of made a misstep, and they didn't think in terms of what kind of repercussions were going to come back. And they just went ahead and decided that they work like they did for the last 20 years, but just accelerate 20 times, 30 times as much. And there's some real limitations there. Number one, the grid is not going to be able to take it. We don't have enough power around here to run the data centers that they built. And so funny is when they announced that they're going to cancel or delay half of the data center projects for 2026. I mean, who didn't see that coming? Anybody who can do math in looking at the grid, the capacity, and what you're able to bring up. And also not an understanding in terms of how people think about that. Data centers are these big, ugly buildings. They're 4 stories high. They have no windows. They don't employ anybody. They may have 6 cars in front of them at a given time. Everything's automated. And the reality is it's not going to do the communities any particular good. Now, it is in Loudoun County because guess what? They're paying a ton of taxes. In fact, half the tax revenue is coming in directly from the data center crew. And this is the richest county in the world. And it's going to continue to be that because they're going to allow the data centers in because of the power. And also we have a big bundle of fiber coming out of the ground here. And so it's cost effective to put them here. But eventually there's going to be some sort of limitation you're going to reach. And I think the grid is going to be a limitation here. And by the way, we burn coal around here. It's not solar, it's not nuclear power. And so, and everybody is funny. Everybody was talking about green computing, 10 years ago. And I was in the middle of that. You don't hear a lick of it now. So everybody's like, they're putting their signs in the garbage.
Well, nuclear is green, I guess that.
Yeah, nuclear is green, but you get pushback on that too. They were talking about that and everybody lost their heads. And so, well, it's got to come from someplace. It's not going to come from solar or steam or, anything like that. So it's either going to come from fossil fuel or it's going to come from nuclear. So pick one or no data centers. And I think people are saying no data centers. And I think they didn't understand that kind of repercussion coming back. And the reality is people are a little sensitive when you go through that kind of a growth spurt. So in other words, if the data center folks would have said, let's be a little bit more conservative in how we roll this stuff out. Let's also put community education that's aligned with how we're going to roll the data centers out. That would go to an nth degree. They didn't do that. They just went ahead and, if they can, they should. And they went ahead and did it. And now everybody's losing their mind and they're getting a grassroots pushback. And they're out there with pitchforks and torches and they're about to burn the places down. And it's their own fault. In other words, they should have understood that this was going to be the repercussions from them doing that. Most people learn in IT. They don't, they're not talking about AI and cloud computing like we are and care less about data centers, but they see these big, ugly buildings are making their power bill go up and or, making lots of weird noises. Sounds like an alien spacecraft. They're going to not like that. And so who would have thought that coming? I think anybody with a brain.
Yes, it's not in my backyard. Particularly, you have some of the most beautiful countryside in the country.
Well, it is in my backyard, but yeah, maybe not in your backyard. My backyard's already got a data center in.
Let's talk about you and your body of work. You've become a social media superstar. How many YouTube followers, subscribers do you have now?
I got about 320,000 on the Cloud Insider channel. That's the older of the channel. I started that the day I retired from Deloitte. And then Dave is Not AI, which basically talks about many of the topics we just talked about, limitations of AI, pragmatic use of the technology, things like that, which is about a year old. And it's about 125,000, I think, followers, and then about 200,000 on LinkedIn. And I know you're doing some major numbers there too, as well as Twitter. Twitter X. So just getting back into the social media stuff, I definitely wasn't posting a lot when I was at Deloitte because I couldn't, because there were limitations of what I could say. Things had to be approved, and I had some things I had to take down. But getting back into it, really kind of using social media as a way to get some of the ideas out there that I think are not necessarily contrarian, but I think are needed in the marketplace right now. In other words, the ability to take a pragmatic use of, look at this stuff, what we can afford, how to use it, how to make it work. I think that's really kind of undervalued in the market right now. We have so many people out there just cheerleading, getting in a big circle, going to the conferences and, just getting and, starting to talk about the joy of AI and all this sort of things. Well, there's a good and the bad aspect of anything. And your ability to kind of look at both sides, I think, has been missing in the market. And that was something I think resonated with a lot of my followers who are mostly IT leaders. They're mostly CIOs and, people who are working in the industry, and they were looking for a voice where they're telling them a bit more of the truth and not necessarily everything on the positive side. And so I'm playing that role, and I'm going to be playing that role probably to the end of my day. And unfortunately enough, people like it, so they follow me.
And they do. And obviously brilliant insights and analysis and a unique point of view, and being occasional contrarian is amazing. But also there are best practices. Any tips, tricks, insights, tactics you'd recommend for folks, including myself? I learned from you, but others who are building a channel, building their social and digital footprint and presence, because it's not just what you say and your point of view. There's a lot behind the scenes that has to work. What's a couple of tactics on YouTube, for example, or LinkedIn that really worked for you?
Yeah, what I do is I use LinkedIn and also my InfoWorld blog as kind of a poor man's focus group. And so I'll come up with topics and I say, well, this is kind of unique topic. No one's talking about it. And some things will resonate, some things won't. And I hit something that resonates, suddenly I'll focus on that on my other channels, certainly putting out more articles on LinkedIn and more YouTube videos as well, which are harder to produce than writing, a blog for 10 minutes a week, which is what I do for InfoWorld. I've been doing that for the last 20 years. And it's really looking at what the sensitive spots are in the marketplace and then focusing on that. With me, it was repatriation. In other words, when I started to talk about repatriation, those things were hit like 100 times more than anything else. And I thought that was going to be something that no one wanted to hear about because in essence, it's kind of a bummer. It's a bummer. We have to basically move everything back to where we found it, which means you have to go to the board of directors and say, oopsie, we got to put everything back on the systems we had. It's not necessarily going like that. But the thing is, no one was talking about it. And that's because, I think the larger narrative out there was moving everything to the cloud, and cloud's good and always going to be good and it's always going to be cheaper, where that's not the case. And I found that out as a cloud architect for many years. And so that was one thing. And the ability to move into some other stuff, some of the contrarian stuff in the agentic space, looking at the downsides of it, the use cases, many of the topics that we saw, those things are hit like crazy. They love the fact that they're getting contradicting evidence, and some of them are being pushed out by the narratives are being pushed out by the big tech marketers out there, and also the ability to kind of call it the silliness in the market. And I just recently called out in a YouTube video the silliness around the whole AI first enterprise that everybody keeps saying, big mantra. All the consulting companies, including Deloitte, are using that over and over again. I'm saying that's the most dangerous phrase I've ever heard in my life, because we had the cloud first enterprise 15 years ago. How did that go for you? Huh? Okay, well, same thing's going to happen here, but guess what? It's 10 to 20 times as much damage that's going to be done. So stop saying that. It doesn't help anybody, and it makes you look silly. And actually, I did some polls out on LinkedIn. You may have saw it, where the silliness is there. It's proven. 80% of the people just think it's marketing dribble. And I think that hopefully the tech providers are seeing that and becoming a little better at producing the message.
I love that. Yeah, taking an edgy, controversial take on issues that are controversial and important can really get a lot of attention. I love the LinkedIn polls you do, a great dynamic on LinkedIn that's unique for audience engagement. And I follow all the channels. So where can people meet you in person? I think you'll be at Dell Tech World. You get around.
Yeah, I get disinvited for more conferences than I get invited to, so that's an easy thing to do. Yeah, I'm at Dell Tech World. They didn't cancel my invitation this week. At least I haven't seen in the mail. I should be at reInvent, and just some anytime they have an analyst participation thing, I'm always happy to show up and learn. But I can be found. Follow me on LinkedIn. You'll see, where I am every day. And I put all my video content there and all my blogs and posts and the InfoWorld content. That's all aggregated to that. And, come see me. And so I always enjoy hearing about case studies and hearing about what people are doing, how they're using the technology. It's fascinating to me. I just never get sick of hearing those stories.
Love it. Well, I like, what you do. And I love how accessible you are and open to doing shows like this. So thanks for joining, David.
Thank you for the invite.
And thanks everyone for listening, watching, sharing this episode. It's going to be quite a blockbuster, I think. And be sure to check out our TV show, techimpact.tv, now on Bloomberg Television and Fox Business Monthly. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, David.
Thank you.